Welcome to First Strike right here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross, and for the next hour, we're going to be breaking down every angle for UFC 267 in Abu Dhabi on Saturday morning for us over here across the pond. It's going to be a great card. Obviously, we've got two title fights on the main event here, and of course, Jan Blachowicz going to put that title on the line against Glover Teixeira, and then an interim bantamweight title with Peter Yan, the big favorite, against Corey Sandhagen. So over the next hour, we're going to have plenty of angles on all these fights. It's a very deep card, obviously, when you get into main events, certainly with pay-per-views and titles on the line. So we're going to have Reed Kuhn join us later on. We're going to have Lou Finocchiaro join us, and Ricardo Lamas, one of the baddest men on the planet, at 145 pounds to help break down this card. But right now, it's always great to have Nick Kalikas right here in studio at Circa, because Nick is the man that sets those lines that we all wager on right here. So, Nick, let's talk about it when we look at the main event to start with Jan Blachowicz against Glover Teixeira. And obviously, age is just a number, I guess, these days when you get to the ageless wonder that is Glover Teixeira at 42. But Jan is getting long in the tooth as well. And I know the Polish power there's a reason why he's a sizable favorite at minus 305. How did you set this initial line, and what type of activity have you seen on it?
Okay, sure. We actually set the line at minus 260. My opening price was minus 260. Now it's been bet up, like you said, upwards towards 280, 285 with us. It's been mostly parlay action that we're seeing, though. It hasn't been any significant straight bet actions, believe it or not. I would think at this point that you would see, some large straight bets coming in. We haven't really seen that. Again, everybody's kind of mixing them into parlays. So the line and market's gradually moving up. So we're moving up along with. But we're going to be cautious, and we'll probably be on the lower side of the favorite here in this spot overall.
It is interesting to me to see how the money that have been coming in on the favorites, and there are a lot of sizable favorites on this main card as well. Let's talk about Peter Yan here against Corey Sandhagen, because Peter right now is up to about minus 210. Most of the markets we're seeing here. Where did that start, and what type of activity have you seen there?
For us, we, again, kind of undercut the market a little bit. I opened a little lower than normal. It was around minus 220 plus 190. And then as the market shifted up a little bit, we stayed steady, right? And then the market started shifting down a little bit. Again, we got some dog action, and we have to respect it a little bit, but it wasn't anything overwhelming. So for me, I think it's a dog or pass situation as far as a booking perspective. Not a very popular opinion. Everybody else is going to say the other way. But for me, again, I would rather have people lay the chalk against a guy like Sandhagen than vice versa. So we opened it lower, we modified it, we adjusted lower, and that's where we are right now.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, Nick, because again, we'll talk about all these fights in great detail here as the hour goes on. But I do think there is a live dog scenario there with Sandhagen getting that plus value. Let's talk about some of the over-unders here in the co-main and the main event, because obviously when you have 5-round title fights, and most fight fans are going to want to look and say, well, if I don't want to play the big favorite, maybe I can go rounds and go with totals here for 2.5 rounds is predominantly the thinking here. What was the first lines that you put out for those over-unders? Let's start off with the main event here with Blachowicz against Teixeira. 2.5
flat. So 2.5, again, we've seen some overs 20, 30s or so, so it's kind of hovering around that 2.5 flat mark. And I think it's about right, because you do have a lot of finishing ability, right? For a guy like Glover, I mean, he has the ability to submit people. His underrated striking is going to come into play here as well, man. I mean, he's just a well-rounded fighter completely. And then, of course, on the other side of it, Blachowicz, he has that finishing ability for sure. He's got the knockout power. And if there's any kryptonite to Glover's game, it's that chin a little bit. As he's aging, it's not getting any better. But he's been tough. We know that, man. I mean, if he could weather that storm, it gets interesting. But 2.5 rounds is about where it's at right now.
It's so interesting to me when we say that, because Glover's chin has been tested, and sometimes he doesn't always pass that test here. And he's going, you would think here, if you're thinking about an overplay and you watch Blachowicz against Israel Adesanya, well, he wrestled the smaller guy. I don't think he's going to try that strategy here as well. So I do think the knockout play here for Blachowicz might be the strategy to go if you're backing the champ in this one, because I do think he's going to try to use that Polish power to get the knockout. Let's go to Peter Yan against Corey Sandhagen again in this potential 5-round matchup in the bantamweight division. Again, I'm assuming we think this one might go longer into the Abu Dhabi night, which would be morning for us.
Right, and it's set about 4.5 rounds, obviously. So this is kind of trending towards a decision there. But again, there's that sweet spot. It's about 4.5 flat or so, because they do have finishing ability, right? I mean, Sandhagen is one of the most elite strikers that we've seen in the division.
Yes.
Yan is obviously has that power. He's got that striking skill. He's the best and most well-rounded fighter that we've seen in the bantamweight division in a long time. So he can strike with people. He can obviously take people down and submit people as well. So the finish is there either side. It's going to be possibility, but at the same time, I think both these guys can kind of withstand each other and possibly go to the scorecards as well. That's why you're seeing 4.5.
Talking with Nick Kalikas, of course, sets the lines here at Circus Sportsbook, but also you do UFC on the line for ESPN Plus. Tell the people a little bit about that show if they haven't seen it.
It's actually on UFC Fight Pass.
UFC Fight Pass.
Correct. Yeah, it's on UFC Fight Pass. So we do the pay-per-view cards almost every time. I mean, that's a given, right? And we're mixing in some Fight Night cards as well. So we give our picks, our breakdowns, our analysis, our best bets, and it's getting pretty popular. It's growing, so it's awesome to see. So make sure you guys tune in.
And it's still a growing sport, and I think that's really cool that you're doing that with ESPN because that's the information. A lot of people in this side so far that are new to UFC, when they look at some of these numbers, and they might not be that well educated, that's what we're trying to give them, that education. To that point, when I saw Dan Hooker, the hangman, and I saw the line that was initially set here going up against Islam Makhachev, and we get it with Makhachev. He's supposed to be the next Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? But what did you make of the initial line that you put out there, and did you see any buyback for the hangman?
No, we're not seeing too much buyback, which is crazy, right? Because
Yes.
I mean, you're seeing 600s or so out there, right? So again, we undercut the market a little bit because you got to respect Hooker somewhat, but at the same time, I'm not a dummy. I know that Makhachev is kind of targeted as the next Khabib, right? I mean, he's just a dominant wrestler, grappler that can go out there and finish fights. He's getting better in the striking aspect of things too. So a lot of people are thinking this is going to be a miserable fight for Hooker, which it could play out to be that way. But like you said, the price on Hooker is kind of an eyesore.
It is. And it says to me, like, man, really? I can get Dan Hooker at plus 460 potentially? Okay, I got to think that through. Let's walk it through here when you look at the over-under for that fight. Again, this is not a title fight, so it's only a 3-round fight here. Are you seeing the backing here? If they don't want to lay the big number with Makhachev, are they playing more of the total rounds to try to find better value there?
It's actually, we've seen some under action coming in a little bit more so. You would think if Makhachev wins this fight, it's probably going to be hitting the scorecards because Hooker's a very durable guy in most cases, right? Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, he's got that submission defense, and again, he's got that durability most of the time. So I would think that if Makhachev wins this fight, it's probably on the scorecards, but we are seeing some sharp action go against that narrative and betting Makhachev inside the distance as far as props go. So the line is dropping as far as total rounds. 2.5 is kind of trending towards the under a little bit now, more so than the over as far as betting action goes.
Yeah, because I think you're right. If you're workshopping it here and you're trying to figure out a way to back Hooker here with the big price, you go, well, could he actually win on the cards? And you saw that it was juiced to the over there. So, again, that's a hard way to go if you think the hangman's going to get it. I did think it was interesting to say inside the distance if you think the hangman can get it done, plus 800 at that value. So maybe if you really want to go with a long shot there, you could think about it. But I'm with you. It feels like Makhachev is the type of guy that wants to get this down to the ground. Hooker might have to survive, and then he probably loses on the cards. That's why you're seeing the numbers priced the way they are. Let's go down a little bit deeper in this card, and let's talk about Alexander Volkov against Marcin Tybura. Again, when I looked at the cards and the way the lines were set here, Nick, there's just a lot of big dogs on this card of name value. And Tybura is another guy that kind of fits that example here at plus 245. Where did you set this line initially, and have you seen any play come in on this?
Yeah, it's been staying around minus 300, so that's where it was at, 290, 300 or so. And honestly, for me, I kind of favor the favorite here in Volkov over Tybura, even though he's been hot and he's been on a roll. And for me, I kind of gave up on Tybura a few fights back when he was on that little skid, but he went on a roll here. He's won some solid fights, good competition, so he's not done yet. I mean, he's fighting towards that title shot, which is great to see. Volkov, on the other hand, he kind of had a letdown spot, right? But against high-level competition, make no mistake about that. Gane is, like, phenomenal, right? And so you can't really knock that against him here. And I think he's in a good spot to rebound here against Tybura. Tybura, again, a hot fighter. I think he's in a position, Volkov is, to kind of steal that momentum and kind of get himself back in the mix a little bit and get a solid win. But it's tough at the price. This is probably going to be a chalky card.
Right. And again, when you mention Volkov, I think it's a great point. With Cyril Gane, I think we all have now what a revelation he's turned out to be. And certainly the Derek Lewis fight for Volkov, you go, boy, he was dominating that fight until he got stopped late. So Tybura, you would think, is going to need to win by knockout. That's been the way to get out Volkov because he's so skilled as a big man here at 6'7". So, again, a 3-round fight there, but Volkov still holding firm as almost $3 betting favorite there. Li Jillian against Kazumata Shimayev. Just watching these two guys in the pre-fight leading up to it, it feels like we're going to get chaos, okay? But Shimayev here is a guy, another huge number at minus 600. Are you seeing any buyback on the dog here just because it feels like this is going to be a, well, swing for the fences type fight?
We are not. I opened at minus 400. I mean, this is a tough one, right? Because Chimaev hasn't been, like, we all know the hype is there. We all expect him to be a future champion, but we haven't seen him perform against really great competition yet, right? Jinglong, on the other hand, he might be that test.
Yes.
This guy is a very good fighter, a very good striker. He could give Shimaev a lot of problems. But the problem here is, again, the narrative, his grappling, Chimaev's grappling is off the charts, right? He should be able to get him down. He should be able to grind on him, and he should be able to probably finish this fight on the ground. So that's where the narrative is, and everybody's betting that fight up. He's in everybody's parlay. The most popular parlay is definitely Chimaev and Makhachev. So those two parlay together, everybody's adding them in NFL parlays, and college football parlays, and NBA parlays. So those two are going to actually, the books are going to suffer if those two do hit, and they probably are going to hit. So.
I got one more minute to go with you, Nick, here, and we're running out of time, which brings up Volkan Oezdemir, no time, as the man used to do when he would win in his ascent to the light heavyweight title fight that he had with Daniel Cormier. Didn't go well for him. Now he's a big underdog against Magomed Ankalaev here, and again, you're seeing this feels like an invasion of sorts in Abu Dhabi with a lot of the same fighters from the same background as big favorites here. Any buyback on the old guy that was fighting for the belt not that long ago?
Not yet, but we are going to see. Make no mistake. I mean, Oezdemir, he's just got so much knockout power and so much experience at this level. And Ankalaev is kind of the unknown product, so to speak, as well. I mean, I think the guy's got it all. I mean, I think he's a potential future champion. I mean, he's got the wrestling.
Yeah.
He's got the great striking, just dynamite. So this is kind of that test to see, are you ready to get in that upper tier of, the light heavyweights? And I think he is probably ready. So again, another tough spot because it's a chalky price, and it's not easy to lay that price, right? But on the other side, the dog is intriguing, and that's why I expect some sharp action to kind of hit that dog to see, like, let's see if you are ready. This price is a little bit high. We're going to take a stab on the underdog.
I got to tell you, I'm just excited that we're talking about big-time fights here. It's going to be a great day here at Circa. And again, check out Nick Kalikas, ESPN Fight Pass right there, UFC on the line. Thanks, Nick. Always appreciate the time and the information.
Love being here. Thank you.
Come on back. Just getting a crank started right here on First Strike on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to get in on UFC 267 action. New customers can make a $5 bet on the UFC 267 main event and win $200 in free bets if you win. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, sign up with the code VSiN, and make your bets for the 267 main event. Eligibility restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full terms and conditions. Back here on First Strike on VSiN, I am Dave Ross, and it's always a pleasure to have the man they call the bully, Ricardo Lamas, join us to break down these fights. One of the baddest men on the planet at 145 pounds. I think he's a nice guy. I wouldn't get into an octagon with him, though. Ricardo, let's talk about the main event here. When you look at Jan Blachowicz taking on Glover Teixeira, and you know me, I say age is just a number. It's a big number for Teixeira now at 42. Jan isn't that much younger, okay, so it's not that huge a discrepancy. But I want to talk about pathways to victory for you that you see here. Let's talk about the man they call Blachowicz with the Polish power here. What does he have to do to retain his strap on Saturday?
Well, he's got to use that famous nickname of his, Polish power. So I think it's in his best interest to keep this fight standing. As we know, Glover Teixeira is a black belt in BJJ. We've seen Blachowicz be very successful on the ground in his last fight against Israel Adesanya, but he was the bigger, more powerful guy as Adesanya was moving up from middleweight to take on Blachowicz. So also Adesanya was only a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. So I think in this fight, Jan Blachowicz needs to keep the fight standing, test the older fighter's chin, and go for the knockout in this one.
Well, you mentioned that testing the chin of Glover Teixeira. So I think a lot of people out there, if they don't want to lay the big number here with Jan at minus 305, they might say Jan by knockout. Is that the likelier scenario for Blachowicz to get the win in your eyes? That if he gets this win, it would be by knocking out Teixeira, not necessarily a submission and or a decision?
I believe that when we get into these heavier weight classes, these guys rely a lot on their punching power. I don't think Blachowicz is going to be that adamant on the takedown in this fight. I think he could have the edge in the stand-up game here. So I would say that the safer bet is going for Blachowicz by knockout or TKO.
Okay, because again, you see Blachowicz by decision, you would get much longer odds there. About plus 225. So they are expecting if Blachowicz gets this win, it would probably be before we go to 5 rounds here. Let's talk about the challenger and Teixeira. And Ricardo, I still can't believe it. I mean, he fought John Jones for the belt back in 2014. Here we are in Abu Dhabi in 2021. He's getting another title shot. So I know he probably looks at this and says, this is my last shot at it. It's got like a Michael Bisping feel to me when he beat Luke Rockhold to become champion for the first time. For the old dog to turn back the hands of time, what does he have to do to pull off this upset?
Well, like I said, we're looking at a fighter that's increasing in age. But when we get to these heavier weight classes, you don't necessarily need those factors that kind of age affects where it comes to speed and reaction time. You just got to be able to land one good punch. So Glover Teixeira, I mean, he's got to look for that good overhand. He's got to look for that good shot to at least daze Blachowicz. And if the fight ends up on the ground, he could look for submission. But, I mean, if I were to see Teixeira winning this fight, it'd be by that lucky punch. I'd also go for another TKO win for Teixeira if I were to be a betting man in this one.
And that's interesting, Ricardo, because what you're basically telling me is both pathways that you see could either be by KO, by stoppage, right? And the total rounds out here in Las Vegas, 2.5. Right now, juiced a little bit to the over at -120, but pretty much that's not a bad price tag. Do you think this fight could be over before we even get halfway through it? Either way?
I think that would be a safe bet. I mean, I just don't like betting on a longer fight when it comes to light heavyweights or heavyweights. These guys have a lot of power in their hands, and I think somebody will get clipped before that 2.5 rounds comes up, and we'll probably see the fight ending on the under.
All right, I'm taking down notes right now, Ricardo, as you say that. All right, let's talk about Peter Yan here against Corey Sandhagen. Look, Ricardo, I am so jacked up for this fight here. This should be a banger in the bantamweight division to become the new interim champion, whoever that might be. Peter Yan right now, you can understand why he's a sizable favorite here, about -210. Corey Sandhagen +175. But again, Ricardo, let's explore pathways to winning this fight that you see them. Let's start off with I think Peter Yan still looks at himself as the champion, though Aljamain Sterling is technically just that. What do you make of Yan? Because obviously that Sambo style that he has, it's not just all about his hands. What do you think he's going to try? What strategy will he employ to try to get this victory on Saturday?
When you look at Peter Yan, he's a very aggressive striker. A lot of his wins come from TKOs. We saw like in his fight against Uriah Faber, who is a grappler, right? He kept the fight standing. He kind of picked him apart, and he's very aggressive, especially with the right hand. But I can see him turning to grappling against Sandhagen if Sandhagen starts to get the upper hand in the striking to kind of slow down Sandhagen's momentum. I don't think he's going to take Sandhagen down and submit it or anything like that, but he could use his takedowns. He's got a lot of great takedowns out of the clinch to kind of slow down that momentum and kind of regain the upper hand, maybe drain Sandhagen's gas tank a little bit. The pathways to victory for Yan are kind of using all of his weapons in the arsenal, whether it's striking or getting that takedown to slow down the momentum. But this is one of those fights, man, where the betting line doesn't really say how close this fight can actually be. I can see this fight going either way right now.
That's fascinating observation because I'm kind of there with you, Ricardo, when I look at it, and you mentioned it there. If Peter Yan is being outstruck by Corey Sandhagen, then maybe he takes the fight down to the ground. I don't think a lot of people see that playing out that way, that Sandhagen might actually, shockingly, have the advantage with his hands. So let's talk about the challenger here at +175. What do you expect from Sandhagen? Because really with Corey, you can kind of expect the unexpected, right?
Yeah, with Corey, that's exactly what I would say, and that's how to describe his style. He's very unorthodox. He's got kind of the footwork of a Dominic Cruz, but the Muay Thai of like a John Jones. He's got jumpy knees and strikes that kind of come out of nowhere, and he combines that very well with his very unorthodox style of footwork and angling. So, I mean, he could really it's hard to train for someone like that. If you don't have a Sandhagen in your camp, how do you get ready for a guy like that? It's going to be very hard. So we might see Sandhagen surprise Peter Yan on Fight Night with a lot of these techniques that he's bringing forward.
Yeah, and again, you see here that people think this is going to go really long into the Abu Dhabi morning here, at least for the East Coast, or back here in the United States. 4.5 is the posted over-under for the 5-round title fight. Do you expect this to go to the distance, or do you think somebody might get clipped and potentially have a stoppage along the way?
I'm kind of on the fence here. I could see this fight going the distance. I can see it being a great stand-up war against two very, good technicians when it comes to the stand-up game. But like Sandhagen has surprised us before in the past with fights against like Frankie Edgar, where he just throws up a jumpy knee, a very well-timed one, and ends the fight like that. That could be another scenario that we can see in this fight.
Very quickly, just on the division as a whole, Aljamain Sterling is the champ, right? When you look at this round robin effect potentially that we have with those three fighters, these two, and then Aljo, what would you make if Sandhagen wins this fight? Aljo could say, well, I already beat him, and Jan could say, and then TJ Dillashaw could say, well, I just beat Sandhagen too. Is this a legitimate interim championship in your estimation?
Yeah, I mean, when we're looking at the interim championship, right now TJ Dillashaw isn't fighting. Aljamain Sterling isn't fighting. We look at the next two best guys in the division. It's Peter Yan and Sandhagen. This is a legit interim championship. These guys are number one and number two in my eyes right now because the other two are out.
I'm right there with you again. Those guys can't go. It's no fault of Jan or certainly Sandhagen in this case, so I wouldn't take anything away from Corey if he were to win that as well. Okay, when I look at Dan Hooker and I see the lack of disrespect, Ricardo, for a veteran of Dan Hooker's stature, and he's getting plus 460 on the comeback against the new Khabib Nurmagomedov in Islam Makhachev. Am I crazy in thinking that the Hangman actually has a shot to pull what would be a shocking upset, at least according to the Vegas odds makers?
No, you're not crazy to think that. Dan Hooker's a guy, he's been battle-tested. He's been in there. He's got lots of finishes in the division. He's a crafty vet. But in my eyes, it would be an upset. I think the one area where Dan Hooker will struggle is with a strong wrestler like Islam Makhachev, that has that Khabib Nurmagomedov style and is just going to frustrate him. Islam isn't a guy that's going to impress a ton of fans with his performance, but he gets the job done. He does what he knows best, which is take the guy down, beat him up on the ground, and might slide into a decision win.
Okay, that's very interesting as well, because when you were in your heyday and running things at 145 pounds, you frustrated people with your wrestling style, right? So how do you stop the wrestler from wrestling if you're Dan Hooker to try to keep this standing and possibly go to the cards here and survive 3 rounds with a guy that wants to take you down?
Well, you can't get trapped up against the fence. You have to use a lot of footwork and lateral movement to maintain control of the center of the octagon. Because if a guy like Islam gets you against the fence, you don't have very much room to defend that takedown. You need to keep him at the end of his punches, stay long, and maybe use one of those well-timed knees as Islam Makhachev is entering in for a double leg.
All right, Ricardo, you're still retired right now, right?
Kinda, yeah, I would say so.
All right, always appreciate Ricardo Lamas joining us here on First Strike. Lou Finocchiaro on the other side of a very short break. Back here on First Strike on VSiN as we break down everything UFC 267. It should be a great night or morning in Abu Dhabi, at least for us here stateside. Always great to catch up with Lou Finocchiaro and talk all things for the fight game. And, of course, you can follow him on Twitter at GamLou, and he's got a great podcast, the Bout Business podcast, that you should listen to if you are a fight fan. Let's talk about the main event here, Lou, and it should be a good one. And I know that when you look at it on paper, you say, well, Jan Blachowicz, the big favorite, almost a 3-1 betting favorite here over Glover Teixeira. When you break down this fight, do you look at this as a live dog for the 42-year-old Teixeira, or do you think this number is right where it should be?
Dave, thank you for having me on. This is going to be a great fight card. To try and answer your question, every emotion and every bit of my heart says that Glover is going to give his absolute best effort. We can trust that. This is his last chance after years and years of struggling to get to the championship. So we know his focus, his effort, everything is there, and we want him to win. Clinically, however, there is no heart or emotion in clinically breaking down a fight. And as I clinically break down this fight, I believe that Jan Blachowicz is a rightful favorite. Maybe not 300, maybe more like 220 to 250. but I really couldn't invest in Glover in this position.
Well, Lou, what I like about you when we talk about these fights, and I know you don't always like to lay those big numbers for good reason, so you try to find the value in there. So if you like Blachowicz here to still be and still and retain his belt, is there another pathway that people might be able to get more bang for the buck if they want to back the Polish power?
Yeah, I think there is, Dave. When you look at this fight, I mean, is Glover going to come out a ball of fire and try and get to Jan, or is he going to be guarded and try and take it late? Either way, I don't see Glover being really effective after the third round. Jan doesn't run out of gas. I think he's stronger. He's clearly structured a little larger. And so for that reason, I would consider Jan inside the distance because it's a 5-round fight. And Glover's 41, close to even money as being an angle I would consider.
Yeah, I actually think that's a good pathway to try to maximize your betting dollar there if you're going to back Jan in this one. Because, again, we've seen the chin tested before with Teixeira. He hasn't always passed that test. And you got to think that Blachowicz is coming with that left hook. That's for sure. Let's talk about another striker, another supreme striker, as we go down to the bantamweight division and the interim bantamweight title between Peter Yan and Corey Sandhagen. And you look at Yan and you think, all right, striker, right? That's what he's going to try to do. He's going to try to get you out. But you know that his background, Lou, is not just that of a striker. This is a well-rounded mixed martial artist. When you look at this $2 price here, and north of that $2 number here, is that the right line? Is that set correctly for Jan over Sandhagen?
I think it is, even though the market's been showing some love for Sandhagen. We have to realize what Aljamain Sterling did to Sandhagen and what Jan did to Sterling. And I know that math doesn't always equate because in this fight, Sandhagen's going to have some dynamic advantages. He's going to have the advantage of height, reach, and 30-foot cage. This can be like two flies fighting in a barrel. That's how much room there's going to be, and that's going to allow Sandhagen to try and use movement to keep separation, to keep Jan off of him. And we know Jan is constantly pressure forward striker as well as master of combat in Sambo.
Yeah, Lou, that's interesting. We had Ricardo Lamas on earlier in the program, and he was talking about that Sandhagen actually, as well-rounded a fighter as he is, could have a slight advantage striking. Do you think Sandhagen here is the challenger, does not want to go down to the ground, to your point, because of that Sambo-style wrestling that Jan has? It seems almost counterintuitive here, but might Sandhagen, with that reach that you alluded to, in order to try to score the upset, keep it standing instead of going down to the mat in a 5-round fight, potentially?
I can't imagine any scenario where Sandhagen would want to take it down unless he gets stung and has to try. Sandhagen has some grappling skills, but he don't want to be down there with Jan, no way. But I do believe Jan's going to try and take him down there and get top position. I think that's part of Jan's program because of the length and the reach and the striking of Sandhagen. Jan's been in with guys like Aldo, Jimmy Rivera, but he hasn't been in with big, long, lanky string bean of a guy like Sandhagen.
We see that it's juiced to the over here to go over 4.5 rounds, big time juice to minus 145. Do you think that this fight will go deep into the Abu Dhabi morning and potentially see a decision, or do you think this could get stopped earlier for a little bit of value if you want to back it before 4.5 rounds?
Yeah, I think I see a decision here. I see the space and the big octagon and the way that Corey Sandhagen is going to fight all manifest itself into a Jan decision.
Yeah, I kind of like that line of thinking as well. Look, I've been trying to make a case for the hangman, Dan Hooker, here when he takes on Islam Makhachev here. But you see the number. You see how big it is at minus 650 for Makhachev here. And again, whenever you have comparisons with the Abir Magomedov, you understand why that number is so big. Do you see any chance here for a potential massive upset, at least according to the number with the Hooker coming back, Dan Hooker coming back at plus 460?
This is the fight game, and anyone that says no to that should be taken off the show. Yeah, absolutely, Hooker has a chance here. He's much taller, man. In fact, if you looked at weigh-ins today as well, the stare-downs, Hooker is the taller man, and that's being barefoot while Makhachev is wearing big padded tennis shoes. So Hooker's going to be taller, he's going to be longer, and he's a striker. And will he be able to time Makhachev coming in on a takedown with one of those pointy knees or elbows? If you're trying to find a reason to back Dan Hooker, you got to go Hooker to win inside the distance at big long numbers, or KO, TKO, whichever derivative. I don't think he wins by submission. But Dan Hooker, if you want to try a long bomb, that's the way you go. Makhachev is totally overpriced, but he's a legitimate 3 or 4 to 1 favorite.
Yeah, I think it's a great handicap, Lou, and I kind of see it the same way. And again, it's not just because I have an affinity for the older guys. He's not that old. He's only 31, and Makhachev is 30. So I think that this is closer, but you can understand why Makhachev is that solid favorite. Let's keep going down the list here, because when you look at Magomed Ankalaev taking on No Time, Volkan Oezdemir here, and Oezdemir, it wasn't that long ago, Lou, where people looked at him before he lost to Daniel Cormier, and he had that title shot at the light heavyweight division. They thought that No Time was a legit player for years in this division. Has his time run out here, even though he's getting plus 245 in the comeback?
Most people betting this fight believe that it is, and they see all those losses, but they don't look at who the losses were to. Prochaska, Rakic, Daniel Cormier, Reyes, Anthony Smith. Ozdemir's been in there with the best. Ankalaev beat Kutalaba twice, who's a complete journeyman. His last win was legit. I'll give him that. He hasn't been in with the kind of fighters Ozdemir's been in with, and Ozdemir got real power. I think Ankalaev is going to try and stand with him early until he tastes a couple of left hooks. Then we're going to watch Ankalaev try and wrestle. I really think Volkan Ozdemir, knowing that this is in Abu Dhabi and the scads of Russians and people from the other hemisphere that couldn't get to Las Vegas getting to these fights, there's going to be a Russian sway. So which one of these fighters is going to be able to interrupt or get in the way of Russian momentum on this card? I think Ozdemir is one of them at plus 260 or better.
It does feel like a fraternity of Russian fighters over here in this card in Abu Dhabi, and who's going to be, they're all big favorites in these contests as we go down the board. Let's see if Volkan could stand up there at plus 245. Let's talk about Alexander Volkov. This is a big heavyweight, 6 feet 7 inches tall, right? Maybe doesn't fill out like some of the fighters that he's lost to recently, taking on, I think, even a smaller guy, but bigger in weight. When you look at Marcin Tybura here, any live dog possibilities here for Tybura, possibly a plus 245 to score another potential upset?
Well, Volkov weighed in at 263 and Tybura 249. So Tybura ain't bigger. He isn't heavier. He's not more skilled. He hasn't been in with the same kind of fighter. And while I said earlier that no handicapper would say no to the question you asked earlier, I'm going to say doubtful because I don't want to be hypocritical.
Right.
I just don't see any realm how Tybura competes in this fight. Volkov is way too much.
But 6'7", 263 versus 6'3", 245. You know, I mean, he's more compact, Marcin Tybura. But again, I look at Volkov and I said, wow, I mean, Lou, the guy's got tremendous skill. We've seen it. But then we saw like Derek Lewis, right, late in that fight that Volkov was absolutely dominating. Do you worry about the lucky punch here from a guy like Tybura? Because I think you're right. Skill-wise, Volkov, he's got the clear advantage there.
No, because the Beast had profuse power. Tybura is not a striker, and in this fight, if he has to fight Volkov standing, he's going to get pieced to ribbons. Tybura is going to try and get inside, hug him, and take him down, and that'll be the key to Tybura's chance.
This is why you need to listen to the Bout Business podcast and follow him on Twitter as I do, @GamLou. Lou, always appreciate the time and the information. We'll catch up again soon.
Thanks so much for having me on, Dave. Good luck to everybody.
Absolutely. First Strike rolls on with Reed Kuhn on the other side of a very short break. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to get in on UFC 267 action. New customers can make a $5 wager on the UFC 267 main event and win $200 in free bets if you win. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, sign up with the code VSIN, and make your bets for the 267 main event. Eligibility restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for full terms and conditions. I am Dave Ross. This is First Strike as we break down everything associated with UFC 267. It's great to have Reed Kuhn back on the program because Reed, as an old fight guy like myself, my eyes sometimes can mislead me, and that's why I love talking to you from an analytical side as we break down these fights. So let's talk about the main event here to start off with Jan Blachowicz against Glover Teixeira. And again, I've been trying to find a pathway that maybe Glover, the old man here at 42, happy birthday to Glover, could pull this upset. When you run your models and you look at the numbers, what are you seeing?
Yeah, happy birthday indeed. If he pulls this off, 42 years old, winning a championship. This is his second time in a title fight. Last time was against John Jones, very different matchup. If you're asking if he has a chance, I absolutely agree with you. I do think he has a chance. Based on current prices, I would actually take a small stab on Glover. If it goes on the feet for an extended period of time, I don't think he wins this, but he is one of those scrappy guys. He could be rocked, knocked down, and then turn that into an opportunity to grab a back. So that still exists, and honestly, he's still looking really good. So assuming that chin holds up early, if he weathers the storm, if he finds an opportunity, maybe it's a scramble, maybe it's on the fence, there is a chance. Now, probabilistically, I don't expect him to win, but based on the prices, I do see value on the underdog. I think he has a better than market value chance to win.
Yeah, I love that rationale, Reed, because again, if people are prisoners of the last fight that they watched, and they watch Jan Blachowicz wrestle Israel Adesanya to victory, right? People are going to say, well, that's what Jan Blachowicz is going to do. But that's not what he's going to do, right? To your point, you would think Blachowicz, if you want to back the Polish power here, you're looking for a knockout, right? So when you run those models, is if you want to take Blachowicz but don't want to lay the big number, might that be the better betting angle if you want to go with the favorite?
Yes. If he doesn't end up with Glover on his back, that means he's out on open water, and he definitely has the better power, and he has the sturdier chin. He's the more accurate striker. He's the younger guy. He's taken less damage. So, yes, Blachowicz by TKO is a reasonable prop if that's the side you want to take.
And again, you see the over-under here for total rounds, split right in half here at 2.5. So again, if Teixeira's chin can hold up initially, Reed, might it be a smarter play to take this over, thinking that, okay, if he can weather the storm, to your point early, maybe make this a longer fight, try to get this fight down to the ground at some point with Blachowicz? Are you seeing any value there and possibly going with the over 2.5?
That's a tricky line. That really is hard to play right in the middle. These guys are light heavyweights. They certainly have the finishing power early. But you're right. If Glover is trying to grind him down and get back control, play that game, it's going to stretch the fight. I'm not going to touch the over-under. I do think, does the fight go the distance? I don't see it going the distance. I see either Blachowicz getting a knockout or Teixeira finding a choke. I think there's only a sliver of a chance that it just turns into a stalemate and position battle, and that's the only way it goes the distance. All
right, that's good value there from Reed Kuhn. Then potentially you want to play inside the decision there, maybe as a good value play. Let's talk about the co-main event. And Reed, I'm really excited to watch Peter Yan against Corey Sandhagen here for the interim bantamweight championship. Yan over $2 betting favorite in this one. We are seeing some buyback now coming in on Corey Sandhagen here. What do you make of this number, and what are the models showing you?
Yeah, this one, I feel a little bit more strongly that the favorite is going to win. Jan, it's going to boil down to the striking, obviously. They're going to be exchanging for sure. Sandhagen is really good at fighting long. He's exceptionally large for his division, and so he actually uses that very well to his advantage. He uses a very high mix of jabs rather than power strikes, and Jan is the opposite. He uses a heavy mix of power strikes. So he's swinging for the fences. Sandhagen is trying to jab you and outpoint you. And so Jan is the harder hitter. I think he's going to be countering more often, which usually does happen when you have a shorter range fighter. But also, I just think he's going to change levels, and he has a way of just turning up the volume when he fights. It's really impressive. So I think this fight takes a few minutes to develop, and it's going to escalate with time. So I also agree with you. This is going to be a bonkers fight. maybe a fight of the night candidate. But I am backing Jan here. I think he has more weapons. He does have an outlet for a ground game as well if he wants to go there. Sandhagen doesn't really use the ground game. He relies on that jab a little bit too much, and I think Jan eventually is going to find an opening.
To that point, when you look at the total rounds here, boy, everybody thinks this is going to go the distance because it's juiced to the over at 4.5. And you mentioned maybe a slow start here as this fight kind of gets underway. Do you see the potential? Do the numbers show anything that say maybe there's value in playing the under 4.5 rounds, or do you think all signs lead to a decision?
Again, that's a tricky one. I think that line is well set. It's kind of 50-50 that this goes the distance. Jan is more likely to finish, and I'm backing him to begin with. So if you're going to give me a ton of value on the TKO prop, plus 225, yeah, maybe a small stab there. But it could easily go. And Sandhagen, he hasn't been knocked out. He hasn't even been knocked down. So it's going to take some damage to put him away. Jan might pile that up, but if he does, it's still going to come late. So maybe take a more conservative over, look for an alternate prop of like over 2.5 or over 1.5. You're going to have to lay a lot, but maybe you're combining that as a parlay because this is a super chalky card. There's other favorites to play and combine that with.
All right, speaking of super chalky, let's talk about Islam Makhachev taking on Dan Hooker. And again, with all of our guests, it's been a great show so far here in First Strike. I'm trying to find people to say, yeah, Dan Hooker at plus 460, that's not a bad way to go. When you run those numbers, can you give me hope that the hangman might hang tough?
He does have the better knockdown power. I will give him that. Based on current price, this is actually a pass for me, to be honest. I mean, the numbers do come out on Makhachev, just not enough to justify paying that price. But I also don't see a ton of value on Hooker unless you're looking for a miracle upset. He does have slightly crisper, more accurate striking, but only slightly. His defense is actually a lot worse than Makhachev, so he does eat a lot of punches, but he is the more powerful striker, at least on paper, according to historical knockdowns. He has 7 knockdowns to his credit. But Makhachev is going to use that wrestling. He's going to smother him, and that sort of negates the best asset that Hooker has, which is his kicking game and long-range striking game. So I'm going to pass on this one just based on the price, but I would pick Makhachev. The only way Hooker pulls it off is with a lucky strike, maybe a head kick, and gets the shocker, but that's the only way I see this.
And again, Reed, when you see the numbers here and you're trying to find value, if you want to back Makhachev here, you see that the submission at plus 225, remember, it's only a 3-round fight. This is billed as the next Khabib Nurmagomedov. Do you think he could get that done inside the 3 rounds if you don't want to lay the 650 and try to get him by sub inside the distance?
I like that play. You go through a little logic tree and say, listen, the numbers definitely think Makhachev is going to win, with maybe 85% certainty. But assuming we're in that bucket, how's it going to happen? It's either decision or it's by submission. It's unlikely to be a knockout. I mean, it's not like his striking is bad. It's actually pretty good. But I don't think he would have any reason to test himself with Hooker at long range. So I think the sub play is actually a really interesting play. I mean, he's going to have 3 rounds to do it. He's probably going to find his way to back control a lot of times. And once you're there, you've got a lot of time to work. And if at first you don't get the choke in, you soften them up some blows, and then all of a sudden you get another choke later. So, that sub play at plus 225 is not bad.
Yeah, and again, I go back to the Conor McGregor fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov, and Khabib actually was out striking Conor at a time there, and then eventually got to finish it. That could be the same type of pathway for Makhachev if he gets in some sneaky strikes at Dan Hooker. You mentioned his defense isn't that good. Maybe Makhachev could then finish it on the ground to get you plus money if you want to back the heavy favorite there. Let's talk about Maquon Amira Connie taking on Lerone Murphy here. And you've got an angle here when you look at Amira Connie at plus 240 against Murphy at minus 305. What are your numbers showing you there, Reed?
Well, first of all, they surprised me. I looked at the betting line. I looked at how many times Amir Connie has been knocked down, 5 times in his career to date. He's not the most effective striker. He's been put on his back a few times. But his submission game is still really good, and he is an excellent grappler. He burst onto the scene and was kind of a thing for a minute because he had some slick finishes early on. But he's been facing stiffer talent. And, he actually survived against Edson Barboza, who's a crazy good striker and a dangerous striker. So that gives me some hope that he's going to survive long enough to find some angle. And if he does, I think he will have a big advantage on the ground. And at 42%, Lerone Murphy's takedown defense is average. That's the only way to describe that number. He's faced 12 takedowns. He's only defended 42%. So I think there's a Hail Mary here with Amira Connie, maybe by submission at plus 700.
I like it. Thank you to Reed Kuhn. Thanks to Lou Finocchiaro, Ricardo Lamas, and Nick Kalikas. Enjoy UFC 267. Thanks for watching First Strike on VSiN.